Well, that's not the business we're here for. We are here for some horror stories. Isn't that right? I hope so, at least. Because that's exactly what you're getting. Okay? Okay. Into horror we go. Now, I hope we can all just relax and listen to the stories I have to tell you. First story, thus titled The Squeeze. The fear has been with me as long as I can remember. I don't know if I was born scared, or whether the fear first came to me during my childhood. Nature or nurture? Or perhaps it's something deeper and more difficult to comprehend. In a way, it doesn't actually matter. The odd thing is how I can't really explain what causes it. What is it that I'm afraid of? Failure? People judging me? Weakness? Or perhaps I just can't stand the thought of letting people down, of being a disappointment, racked with guilt for the rest of my days. A great leader once said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." A good philosophy I wish I could live by. But unfortunately, it's not so simple. And of course, mental health professionals will tell you, that fear is perfectly natural response to fears, stresses, or danger. The fight, flight, or freeze reflex. I suppose it's imprinted in our DNA. It's how our brain reacts. An instinct that we cannot control. But for people like me, the fear, guilt, and self-loathing can become overwhelming. So much so that the depression and anxiety that we feel becomes crippling, preventing us from living our lives or functioning at even the most basic level. Over the years, long have I suffered from these negative emotions almost constantly. Medication and support help, And there have been times, and even in extended periods, where I felt content or even happy, but I can never ever, ever get rid of the fear. It's a monkey on my back that I cannot shake off. The story I'm about to recount here isn't an easy one to tell. The incident was the worst of my life, and I count myself very, very lucky to have survived it. I've experienced acute mental health episodes before, of course. Periods when I felt so low that I couldn't wash, eat, or even get out of bed for days at a time. Nevertheless, I always knew I could get through these dark periods and come out on the other side. But what happened to me last year went way beyond anything I'd ever suffered before. It was as if all my worst fears and nightmares came to pass all at once, and I was no longer fighting demons inside my own head. For those absolutely terrifying couple of days, I was stalked and terrorized by a monster that was all too real. Was this beast a physical manifestation of my depression and paranoia, or an actual demon sent to me from the depths of hell to torment me? I cannot say for sure, but nevertheless I think it's important that I tell my story, if only to give hope to others facing the darkness I too am facing. Because no matter how bad things get, there's always a way back. I was at rock bottom when the beast came for me. My long-term partner had left me following a messy breakup, and I fell into a pit of despair and self-pity. I missed a lot of work. Eventually, my employer let me go. And with no job to go to, I no longer had a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I was completely isolated by this point, barely leaving the house, and not speaking with friends nor family. At the time, I felt like everyone had turned against me. This wasn't the case, of course, but there were still people who cared about me. But I had cut them all out of my life, refusing to take their calls or respond to their messages. Again, it's a hard thing to explain. Part of me feared they would judge me, telling me to stop being weak and pull myself together. Which I, of course, could not do. On the other hand, I rationalized that they were better off without me, because I was nothing more than a burden and embarrassment, and so it would be preferable if I disappeared from their lives altogether. Once you fall into that pit, it's difficult to pull yourself back out again. And the longer it goes on for, the worse it gets. Nothing could make me feel better. None of the crutches or addictions I'd previously relied on. Drugs, alcohol, lust, escapism, nothing worked. I spent most of my time in bed, sleeping for 12 to 18 hours a day. Sleep was the only escape I had, the only peace I could find. The world of dreams and memories of better times brought me some respite, but it never lasted. The worst part was waking up. This was when I remembered who I was and all the problems I had. And then the fear would hit me like a ton of bricks. The pressure I would experience in that harsh moment of reality would be intense, making me feel like a tube of toothpaste being squeezed ever so slightly and tightly. I would lie in bed with the duvet pulled over my head, physically shaking and flinching at every slight noise outside my bedroom window. I didn't wash and I barely ate, and anything that did pass my lips wouldn't stay down because my stomach was twisted in knots. This went on for several days, and my mental state only deteriorated as time went by. Before long, my paranoia kicked in. I had run out of food and essential supplies, but I couldn't leave the house even to go to the shops. I thought the people were out to get me, that they would stare at me in the streets, judging me and talking about me in whispered tones, saying I was disgusting and pathetic. I feared I would be spat upon and physically attacked if I stepped outside my front door. I stopped going online too, fearing the trolling, abuse, and threats that would inevitably follow as the keyboard warriors sought me out to pile on the hatred. And then my family finally got a hold of me. They convinced me to see a therapist. They convinced me that I deserved to feel better. But when I went to see this therapist, there was no human at the doors. Only a monster who sought out to hear all my worries and woes. They wanted everything. Every last drop of my insecurities. And eventually I stopped seeing them as human. And eventually I had to, shall we say, take care of them? Well, I'll let your imagination fill the rest. And there's your horror story for the day. Fairly short.